Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio. I'm your host, and of course, welcome. I'm glad to have you along today, especially for this returning guest of the show, James Hoffmann, and I'm excited for the conversation and what you're going to get out of it. But if you are not subscribed to the show, you could be missing out on content because we produce probably about 9-10 episodes every month, and that's twice weekly, and then sometimes 3 episodes on the end of the week or end of the month with our Founder Friday episodes. So lots to keep up with, but that's a lot of value in conversation and insights on topics that are relevant to running a great coffee shop. And that's what we're all about. That's why we call ourselves Keys to the Shop, right? So subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and so forth. Wherever you listen to your shows, I would encourage you just to subscribe, get notifications. And if you want to reach out to me, you can email chris@keystotheshop.com for coaching and consulting for you if you're opening a coffee shop or you want to make your coffee shop better. This is what I do full time. So reach out, chris@keystotheshop.com. And I would always encourage you to share these episodes. If you just click on the sharing icon when you're listening to this and put it out there on X, put it out there on LinkedIn or elsewhere, you can do that pretty easily, and it's usually really helpful for the show. So thanks everybody for all of that. So our episode today, of course, is sponsored by our friends at Arto Brick, and that's at Arto Brick on Instagram. They produce hard surfaces, tile, stonework for residential and commercial spaces. Coffee shops are one of the things they do a lot of. And then also our friends at the Pacific Barista Series, the plant-based beverage OGs in the space that are just continuing to set the standard high for plant-based beverages. And we're going to talk more about both of those folks later in the episode. But first, and to get right into it, we're going to introduce our guest, which feels kind of funny, honestly, to say that you need to introduce James Hoffmann, because James Hoffmann has created a platform that is his name in a sense. Like the James Hoffmann platform is maybe more than who he is as a person. It's the idea of coffee education and exploring the fun, the art and the craft, the facts, the history of coffee. Of course, the World Atlas of Coffee is in its 3rd edition now, coming out this year. And James Hoffmann, if you're not familiar, is the co-founder of Square Mile Coffee Roasters in London. It's a multi-award-winning coffee roasting company based in East London. And he was the 2007 World Barista Champion, having won the UK Barista competition in both 2006 and 7. And he got a YouTube channel that he started. I remember the first video that he produced, and all the way up until today, where he has 2.3 million subscribers, and he makes videos about anything regarding coffee. Anything about like I said, the history, the craft, and exploring the crazy and the not so crazy parts of coffee. He's the author of the World Atlas of Coffee. There's my copy right there, and he has that now in the 3rd printing. A 3rd edition is coming out in this year, and the Sunday Times bestseller called "How to Make the Best Coffee at Home." So for James, as somebody who is a coffee business owner, a coffee competition champion, and somebody who is really beloved in the space of both professional and home coffee, this is a perfect opportunity for us to bring him on the show again and talk about not just the whole like home coffee versus coffee shops stuff, which we do talk about that, but also the idea around how coffee shops are an educational resource in and of themselves. And there's a lot we can learn from somebody who has made his living educating people on coffee and giving them coffee knowledge. So we're going to discuss things like the evolution of people's thirst for, pun kind of intended, knowledge on the coffee subject, and for making coffee at home, yes, but also appreciating coffee when they go out to a coffee shop. So is it fair to pit home versus, commercial? It's fun to do, but let's not forget that any interaction with a consumer is an opportunity to advance the cause of coffee and the cause of that person's enjoyment of coffee. And that's something that I think James does a really great job at. And so as we talk, we're going to jump into that subject. We're going to learn about how he goes about the educational process, what the perspective on coffee knowledge is today versus when he started all of this with his YouTube channel. We're going to talk about hospitality too, and how incredibly important that is in the whole scheme of things, especially related to coffee shops, and how we can actually take a cue from all that he's learned and create something that's unique and valuable for the consumer in the education that happens naturally in the course of service day in and day out. You know, we're a little cagey around this idea of saying we just want to educate the customer. But, you know, that's one of the things James talks about. You know, there's a buy-in moment for the customer. They have to be the one to say, I want to learn. And we have to be the ones to say, well, we know and we will help you just enjoy coffee in a deeper way. And that's what it boils down to. So I'm excited for this. I'm really grateful to have James on the show again. And so I hope you enjoy it as well. Here we go. Here now is my interview with World Atlas of Coffee author and YouTuber, James Hoffmann. Well, James, welcome back. It's been a while, but it's great to have you back on the show.
Thank you very much for having me back.
Indeed. You know, I am obviously, like everybody else, we keep up to date with what James Hoffmann is doing online, because these days it feels, and it sounds strange to say, I know, it's just the shudder. But I think that the position in the industry that you've evolved into, I mean, it's almost 10 years now since your first video, and you started this channel with the idea, I think I'm going to do a YouTube channel. And now with various collaborations and, of course, with millions of subscribers, it's not a far stretch to say that people reference James Hoffmann's content part and parcel with coffee. And I imagine that sounds strange to you just hear me talk about it.
Yeah, it's never going to feel normal.
Yeah.
It's nice to feel relevant in some ways, but yeah, there's part of it that also freaks me out quite a lot.
Well, I'm curious about that a little bit, because there's this, of course, you wanted this in some ways, like you wanted to talk about coffee and everything related to coffee. And people's appetite seems to have increased for coffee information in the last, well, let's say in the last 10 years. It feels like it's constantly increasing. But from your purview, you get a lot of comments and a lot of conversation happens around the content. So I'm kind of curious what your perception is related to the appetite for coffee information, as you have been part of the drive for this to increase the appetite for it.
That's a good question. I suppose I don't necessarily think the appetite has changed as much as some people might. I think it has grown. There's no question. Like COVID is a big piece of that. It kind of grew interest in coffee as, you know, people brought it home in a different sort of way. I think what's been a constant and perhaps been underserved is the sort of just the appetite for just interesting stuff to do with coffee. Not necessarily information, but and not fully entertainment either. But I feel very strongly, as do a lot of coffee people, that coffee is full of interesting stories, you know, in a variety of fields and domains. Historically, I think the coffee industry wanted to sort of share quite fixed bundles of information. We wanted to tell you where coffee was grown quite aggressively. We thought that was very important. And we wanted to tell you in great specificity how you should brew a cup of it. And that was most of the communication that we were doing. And I think there was sort of limited access, sort of limited appetite for that in some ways. But I think if you sort of open it up a little bit more and it becomes less specific, I think there's actually just a broad, people like coffee, they like it as a part of their day. And I think if you can say, learn a little something more and you might enjoy your coffee more, they're like, all right, what have you got? And if you can present it and sort of share it in a way that they can find either entertaining or relevant to how they drink coffee and where they drink coffee, then I think the appetite is there. Like I'm often referred to as being in a niche. And you'd think, yeah, that's okay. You make coffee videos on the internet. That's a niche. And you're like, sure. But it's also one of the most popular beverages in the world. That's, you know what I mean? Like coffee's not really a niche. And you could have argued maybe 10 years ago that specialty coffee is a niche. I don't know if you can really argue it's a niche anymore. It is in every city, in every town, pretty much around the world now. It's a global thing. It's not that niche. So there's definitely millions upon millions of people, hundreds of millions probably, who enjoy coffee, thoughtfully enjoy coffee in some way. And so, I think they just wanted different stories and different things to learn about along the way.
Well put. In the idea of wanting to know different pieces of information about coffee, you said it, that maybe I can make my coffee a little bit better. But it feels like it's also this, we like to learn about it inside of our already existing habits. We have a habit to go online to learn information about something in a safe environment where we don't feel talked down to. And we did like to all of the information about coffee, but it was a little intimidating for people. And we were, I think, in a lot of ways niche. So it's okay that people have this idea of, where's the accessible information in coffee. Now, your original videos talking about, how to, and still do, like even the recent one on filter paper, which is, I still
That's
remember
pretty
the
niche. That's
how
pretty
much
niche.
water you were recommending to rinse your filter with. But we'll get to that later. The average consumer, they really do want it broken down as simply as possible. And I imagine your content has shifted from the coffee geeks that are die hard, this is coffee is my personality, to creating a little bit more balance with, it doesn't have to be your whole personality. It could be part of your day. It could be made a little bit better. And here's this content. Had you perceived that shift happening in your content?
I think a lot about the sort of what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring people in to this thing. And I think a lot about what was a kind of rule for me for a long time in a retail setting, which was you cannot or should not, say should not, attempt to educate or inform a customer without them asking a question first. Because historically, this is where everything fell down in specialty coffee. Like people would come in, try and buy a coffee, and we would launch into just little tirades about how great it was. And they were kind of like, I didn't ask, dude. Like, I just want the coffee. Whereas I think if you can get someone to be like, why do you do that? Why do you do the little swirly thing? And you're like, great, now I've got you. Now you're interested. You've asked a question. It's carte blanche, right? Like I can get as nerdy as I want to, depending on my ability to read a conversation and another human's face. But I got to get you to ask the first question. I've got to get you to request the information because I've scratched something in your brain that makes you genuinely interested to know an answer. And so I think the question I most want people to ask is like, why is this coffee taste different to this one? Because then you're in, right? Like all of the answers to that get very satisfying, and down the rabbit hole you'll end up going, and coffee will be a really fun, interesting part of your life because you're like, okay, I can explore this thing. But I'm interested in making things that get people to ask a question, I suppose. Do you know what I mean? Like, and that's not everything in every way. Like we try and make a broad mix of stuff because of how the world of broadcast works now with video. But I think when we aim to do the fun stuff, I want to entertain you, but leave you with like, I have a question I would like to ask. And that's the perfect place. Like if I can answer that question, even better, because then we can build a relationship. But yeah, the number of hardcore coffee geeks out there has grown, but they're also increasingly well served by small niche communities. I look at places like Discord and like the Espresso Aficionados Discord, which is the most intense coffee place I suspect on the internet now. I can't, it's too much for me. It's overwhelming. I can't, it's too much. But if you are really deeply into coffee, you probably should be on that Discord. I feel like that's for better or worse in some ways. But I think the wider audience is sort of open to a little bit of nerdery if it seems fun. If it seems joyless and a bit earnest, then they're less into it. But if they're allowed to have fun, I think that's a good way of kind of getting people into.
Yeah, I like that. The idea of fun is an idea that they feel safe to enjoy coffee. You're free to enjoy coffee. We all liked recess in school and getting some time off of study, and it
Right.
felt especially fun because we had been working, and so it's the cup of coffee you have in front of you after making it. That's the enjoyable part, not the making it per se. I mean, some might argue, but here's a question for you. What is it that gives you the idea that something that you've put out there, like what feedback do you receive where you think, this did what I wanted it to do? I'm accomplishing what I set out to do with this content. How does that look for you as an educator?
That's a good question. This will go back to a piece of advice that I was given quite early in my sort of speaking career, like, public speaking kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody said, don't ask people what they thought of it, because they'll always just tell you it was good. That's useless. Ask them what the one thing they took away from it was. And that broke my heart when I first started doing it after giving talks, because you would give a talk that you thought was coherent and thoughtful and had a message, and you'd ask them, well, what did you take away? And they just heard something totally different. And you're like, oh, I need to work on my communication. And that's great. And so I think it's when there might be an underlying message to something, not subtext necessarily, but like there's a thought I'm maybe trying to put in your head. If I see that echoed back, that's very satisfying. Do you know what I mean? Like when they have followed the process through and thought through along with me. So that's maybe not the most obvious answer. I mean, look, the internet, you have to sort of be a little bit careful with the comment sections of the internet, because it's a bit like the sort of the infinite monkeys typing Shakespeare. Enough people will comment on your videos that you will definitely read something you wish you hadn't read. We all have insecurities. And it turns out if you have 10,000 people throwing sticks at, darts at a dartboard, one of them will land on a bullseye by mistake or not. And you'll read someone say something that will ruin your week. Because like everything I hate about myself is true. That totally happens. So I have a sort of limited interaction with the comments from a sort of mental health preservation perspective. So that's harder. I mean, obviously resonance in terms of people like it, people share it, people watch it is very satisfying. And when the messages that you do kind of glean from browsing the most liked comments, usually at the top, if that resonates with what you were trying to say, then that feels like a win, as good a win as you can get, I think.
I'm curious if there's ever a time where it's something somebody comments, maybe not it wasn't the intention, but that's really interesting point that they made as a result of your content that you hadn't have thought it would have been a takeaway, and it actually added to the content, and it didn't just merely reflect what you wanted them to get from it.
I think a big part of not success, a big part of just my enjoyment of it all and satisfaction of it all is the community that exists around it. And so often I might ask a question in a video, and the comments that come in responding to that particular question will often be fascinating and hugely illuminating, if that makes sense. Like people will share a little life story, share a little experience, and others see value in that. And it's quite a positive place. YouTube comments historically didn't used to be a very positive place on the internet. They're getting better. They're much better. But yeah, I think definitely everything from that's an idea we need to make a video about through to, oh, that's very satisfying to sort of see a mirrored experience, or, that's a whole other opinion. There is definitely value delivered by people who watch and share their experiences.
You strike me as somebody who's curious about things, coffee, of course. And it feels like everything you've just said so far in our conversation is based on this idea of curiosity and like exploring a topic alongside an audience for your own sake. Yeah, it's entertaining to you too, or else you wouldn't have done it all these years, but to them as well. And it feels like, and maybe you can weigh in on this, curiosity toward how we can improve and optimize or whatever coffee is the realm of people who make coffee at home a little bit more than it is people who run coffee shops, coffee businesses. And this is, again, maybe just an unfair assumption, but from what I've seen, a lot of people really love to reach one conclusion, and thank God I reached one way to do it. I'll do it like that forever because it feels secure. Whereas at home, at least in today's home coffee community, it feels like people are a lot more curious than the average operator is curious.
It's an interesting time right now because historically, coffee at home was never really in a kind of competition with coffee out of home. They were very separate independent markets. And that changed kind of post-COVID, where it suddenly felt like coffee at home for a bunch of people became competitive to coffee in a cafe. I don't really think it is. And I don't know if those two groups sort of sit oppositionally in that way. Like I think one of the things that has come up is the idea that coffee at home maybe has some advantages over coffee in the cafe, right? And it does. I think every cafe would serve better coffee if it had to only do it twice a day. It would be a little easier. Do you know what I mean? Like I think there's such a different place for those drinks now in a funny sort of way. Like I feel like the pressure on an operator is so entirely different, and it's just a whole other thing to make coffee 500 times a day. It's just so wildly different, and the pass fail of that is probably not how good was that, but how bad was that? Like actually, like where was my lowest ebb of the day? You know what I mean? Like because the shop that does 7 out of 10 to 8 out of 10 and that's it will always beat out the place that does the 5 out of 10 to the 10 out of 10. And let me reassure you that the home brewer probably has more 5 out of 10s than a really good shop that just does 7 or 8 out of 10. They are closer to the kind of less consistent cafe, but it's a different game. It's a different purpose. It's a whole other thing. And so I don't see the challenges of making coffee at home and in a cafe as being kind of oppositional. They're just totally different things. They really are totally wildly different things. And then I also think about the experience of drinking coffee in the home and in the cafe as totally different things. And yes, sure, if you just pulled a 100 ml sample, pulled a 3-ounce sample out of a home brew and a cafe brew 1,000 times, maybe on average, the cafe brew might be better. But that isn't how you drink coffee. That isn't how you drink coffee. You drink it in set and setting. You drink it for different reasons, different times, different purposes. Coffee in a cafe is so many different things that coffee at home is not, experientially. And I think sometimes that gets a little bit lost or not worried about enough, if I'm honest. I think a lot about, I'm drifting, I apologize. I'm going to just wander off at this point. But like coffee shops have a bunch of advantages if they're willing to use them around environment, experience, hospitality. God, hospitality is just like everything. That can change the experience of a cup of coffee. I'm connected through Square Mile to a coffee shop called Proof Rock. And Proof Rock wasn't started by Square Mile, but we took it over about 5 years ago. And because Gwilym Davis, former World Barista champion, was one of the founders. He moved to Czech Republic. Jeremy Challender, one of the kind of key people at Barista Hustle, moved back to Australia. The other founder wasn't really around London, and so we sort of took over that. And I don't really advertise my direct connection with that cafe. But people work it out, and therefore people go there having watched me talk about how to make coffee and how to enjoy coffee with expectations of a cup of coffee. And that's obviously very difficult, right? That's how does a cafe, a busy cafe, hundreds of tickets a day, meet the expectations of its customers who have come because they've seen me make YouTube videos, right? Like, how do you do that? You can have great coffees in the hopper, and Proof Rock don't just buy from Square Mile, they buy from a variety of other roasters. They have some fantastic coffees. Sure, that helps. And they brew well. They're professionals and they're very good at what they do. But I would say the thing that allows them to be so successful in delighting people who come with high expectations is service and hospitality in a funny sort of way. It's such a big lever that you can pull that really changes the experience of which coffee is a component piece. And I think coffee people disproportionately value sometimes the coffee piece of this, both behind the bar and as customers. You know what I mean? We can get a little lost in the cup. But actually for most people, it's a piece of a puzzle. It's setting, it's experience, it's everything from who greeted you when you walked in the door to how clean was the bathroom to how loud was it? Could I hear someone else speak? All of it, you know what I mean, is tied up in the final experience. And that's why I feel relaxed and happy and delighted that people go there with high expectations, because I know that they're going to be met in a sort of more coherent way than just a flawlessly extracted espresso. You know what I mean? Like that's not going to be enough to delight them or make it memorable. I don't know if I've answered your question.
It totally did. And the idea is you could have the flawless coffee in a place that doesn't get that other thing right. and you'll know at that moment why what you said is just so important. The hospitality. I was thinking
Yeah.
hospitality is like water for the experience. Like the water quality for coffee is so important. Hospitality has to be the water of the cafe experience in that way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love what you're saying there. And the enmity between home or cafe, yeah, it's a little overwrought in that. I love the point of making only a few coffees a day. You can dote on it. You can have a little Zen garden in the portafilter going on, and just take your time. I make great espresso on my little flare here back in my kitchen, and it's unrivaled. I'm a little biased, but it's definitely
Sure.
very good. But the idea is maybe that people love being able to dive into doting on their coffee because we've missed a little bit of the intentionality in the cafe, but we have an opportunity to kind of learn some things. And we have actually benefited and been challenged by the expectations being elevated, the taste expectations being elevated. And I'm curious what kind of innovations, or maybe we could say points of evolution, have happened from your perspective in the home coffee world that have really changed the coffee industry itself. Because we used to have a lot of innovations come from bubbles. The competition world is a bubble. The EK43 is ubiquitous because of competitions. The other little things, you're doing 15-minute presentations, and then all of a sudden worldwide you see a thing happen. And in home circles now, with access to the internet, when we see your channels and others, it seems to be kind of a domino effect, a ripple effect of what happens in innovations in the home market. What are some things that have shifted for the whole industry as a result of that particular part of the industry?
That's a good question. And it's a difficult question, actually, because I'm not sure anything really leaps out. Like if I look at the big innovations in the home market that have really pushed home coffee forwards, it would be things like grind-to-order grinders getting surprisingly cheap and surprisingly good, right? Like that, historically, the best of the home grinder was a tiny, cheap version of a commercial grinder, and it had the workflow of a commercial grinder, and it was kind of annoying. But innovation at home has changed grinding to be a whole other thing, but that has no place in a coffee shop because it doesn't work to single dose 400 espressos a day. Like no one's
Right.
should be doing that, please. I hope. Please don't do that. There has to be it's just not worth it. Whatever the time was to weigh those out, and do it, just not worth it. And it still has been ultimately commercial innovation driving home stuff forwards. But it's just unleashed it in the home. We've known about water quality being a big deal for a long time, and water treatment systems for cafes were significantly ahead of what you could do in the home. But now, because we worked out it's important, and actually we don't need gallons of it a day, you can get a zero water filter and remineralize with a little dropper kit and have flawless coffee water. But you only, 2 brews worth at a time, or whatever you're going to make, or like a liter or 5, whatever. But it's all tiny scale and so totally different. And so it's interesting that it's back to why I kind of see them increasingly running in parallel rather than at each other. You know what I mean? Like I don't see much going from the home to cafes. Some cafes will leverage the language of the home, and they'll have a high-end home grinder, like an EG1 or something expensive like that, to sort of showcase that we do small things slowly or whatever else. But the world of the cafe is operationally so different. The requirements are so different. You know what I mean? At home, you're still making maybe 3 different beverages. Maybe. Do you know what I mean? Like your menu at home is pretty short. It's not a cafe menu. You don't have to think about all of those things or juggle those stocks or, you know what I mean? Train those recipes and QC them and all of that kind of stuff. And so while home espresso has begotten, or home coffee has gotten more and more accessible, and the higher ends of it have gotten easier because we can just leverage labor in a way that we just can't in a cafe. Do you know what I mean? Like there's probably something very funny about some massively overpaid professionals spending an hour of their time messing around with espresso and feeling like they're making it, it's cheaper than the $4 down at the cafe. And you're like, as long as you value your time at absolutely zero, then that's probably true. You can have fun. That's totally okay. Like, I think that's great. But no one costs their own labor in their morning cup of coffee, which I think is kind of funny. Anyway, that's not
we need some
point.
P&Ls here. Right.
Like the home espresso is suddenly deeply in the red. Like nothing, you know what I mean? Like that. Just don't think about the labor costs or your rent or any of that stuff. Anyway, so yeah, I struggle to think of that. I feel like I can speak more in geographies that I'm familiar with, so I can't speak broadly to the whole of the US. A bunch of innovation and experimentation has happened in the last 10 to 15 years in coffee shops. But in all of that, I don't think anyone really found a model or a process that caused a sort of game change, a step change, if that makes sense. Like if you go back to the days of, and this is not to pick on anyone involved, like Intelligentsia Venice. Do you remember when that opened? That was a big deal. Like this was 4 espresso, 4 pods. There was one line and you would take the guest to the pod and you have a little experience with them and like a one-on-one and all this stuff. And cool. It was really valuable to try that. Did that work? No, like not. I mean, it works as much as anything else works. It didn't. You know what I mean? And I think as coffee has gotten more competitive, that has reduced people's both risk and capacity for sort of risk. As in, you could probably get away with something unusual and daring if you were the one shop in a 10-block radius that did really great coffee. You'd have a little time probably to work it out before the crunch point. But if you're, one of 10 shops now in that same radius, the pressure's different. You don't really have a bunch of time to mess around and see what's possible because you need to quickly and efficiently serve people and make them happy, to pay the bills, to pay the team. It doesn't allow experimentation in the same way. And that's just one of the challenges of this current market. We've never had more good coffee shops than we have today, ever. Not even close in history. Like it's absurdly competitive. And the same is true of roasting. You can start a roasting business, but you got to know you are up against hundreds, possibly thousands of competitors who maybe have a little bit of a thing. Maybe they don't. Maybe their thing is price. Maybe their thing is co-ferments. Maybe their thing is packaging or story or relation, whatever it is. Like your space to try something genuinely new will mean you need a bunch of runway. You need a bunch of capital to do that. No one's going to give that to you unless you're going to turn around and promise them 10x that back. Or, I mean, banks used to lend you money, but they don't do that in most places anymore. That was kind of their function, but then they sort of stopped doing that. And so you either need to ask for a lot of money or not really very much at all. And those two things don't really allow for a ton of experimentation. And I think that's one of the reasons we've seen less risk-taking at a retail level, especially in the last 5 years than we saw in the earlier days of specialty.
It's interesting that the success of specialty coffee and the proliferation of shops, maybe not every shop is successful, but it certainly are present. It sounds like what you're saying is almost like forced stagnation of innovation in a sense, like, or it is proof that innovation has actually been successfully integrated and we don't need to constantly innovate if we've actually improved things to the degree that it's satisfying, it's good. At which case maybe innovation is a fool's errand at that point.
Yeah, I think it sort of needs a few moonshots to really see a significant change. I think also we're kind of, if you look at the historical cycles of business, we had a weirdly interrupted phase where we were kind of going into the consolidation phase. You know what I mean? If you looked at JAB, we're starting to roll up everybody. You're still seeing a little bit of private equity money rolling through coffee now, but it was one where you can't buy growth any other way than inorganic growth, just buying a business to add to your turnover in a fine sort of way, because markets are so competitive and this drives consolidation. Consolidation tends to make a market really boring, reduces consumer choice. And then, you see a kind of reaction to that. and then something new happens. It's a kind of sorry for the coffee pun, a counterculture kind of moment, and that's what specialty was a response to Starbucks and all of that. Like it needed something to push against. There was not a lot of choice, and so now there's a huge amount of choice, kind of, in coffee. So yeah, I think that's a piece of it. It doesn't mean I can predict the future, but yeah, I think it's why most coffee shops still kind of look like most coffee shops.
Well, hey everyone, it's Chris. Let's take a break here for a second to talk about those sponsors that I talked about earlier in the episode. That is Arto Brick and the Pacific Barista Series. First, the place of a coffee shop is enormously important. The feel, the textures, the surfaces. When you're building a coffee bar, you've got to consider the functionality, but also the visual functionality of a space. So when you work with Arto Brick, arto.com, and on Instagram, it's at Arto Brick. They are an LA-based, made in the US, made right there in LA, like literally from stones to beautiful tiles right on their premises in Gardena, California. And they have done such an amazing job making people's dreams come true with designs that they have in their head. They can put that on a tile. I mean, it's pretty cool. And I would encourage you to go to Instagram and then follow them at Arto Brick, reach out to Armin on DM there, and then start the conversation. If it's your second store, your first store, remodeling, they can help you. And so thanks to them for sponsoring the episode. Now, also our friends at the Pacific Barista Series, that's the line of plant-based performance beverages that are made for baristas. They're tested by world-class baristas. Before you even buy it, you know that it's been through this process of incredible intentionality and testing of functionality on the bar by people who know what they're doing, right? That's why it performs the way it does. Stands up to the heat from steaming, great texture, keeps the balance of flavor focused on coffee. And all you need to do is go to pacificfoodservice.com to get samples sent to your store, and you can taste what I'm talking about for yourself, you and your team. I would encourage you to do that. And if you're looking for the best plant-based beverages to serve your customers to make the biggest positive impression, I think you should be looking at the Barista Series from Pacific. Well, it almost feels like part of the answer to this question could be what you were talking about before, which is hospitality. But when we think about the fact that every day we wake up, we have a cup of coffee, we've got energy to maintain what we're doing and do it with excellence. That's one of the things that Maxwell Dashwood was talking about. Maintaining excellence is sort of like a focus point right now. But if there is anything to optimize or to focus on in coffee that needs to be focused on, what would you say it is? I mean, not even predicting the future, but reading the room and saying, here we are, and here's where we could go. Maybe as coffee people, coffee professionals who, at this point, let's face it, even the coffee shop is a repository of information for home users. We distribute roasted coffee. We answer questions at the bar. We're like an IRL YouTube channel for our customers, right? So how do we spend our time and effort and focus and energy to really make things better? And I mean, what things need to be better?
Good question. I think there's a sort of short-term and a medium-term thought on this one. I have a sort of reasonably bleak medium-term opinion on coffee in that, well, it's not bleak, actually. It's just people would consider it bleak. Currently, demand is outpacing supply, and that will continue as more and more of the world keeps drinking coffee, China in particular. And I think that cheap coffee will always be cheap. I think there'll be enough technology and enough return on investment to keep cheap coffee cheap for a good long while. But the price of good coffee will further separate from cheap coffee. And there'll be less of it. Whether you take the longer term view of climate change drives coffee up the mountain where there is simply less mountain, or you just take it as a kind of classic supply demand. There are more roasters buying specialty coffee now than there were. There are less growers. There's less capacity within the system to grow this kind of a coffee. What kind of, if I was a coffee shop today, I'd want to sort of be thinking about, in 5 years' time, where will I sit on the spectrum in terms of the coffee that I will buy? Will I have given in and or I say given in. If you started a specialty, and then I would say you've given in. If you've gone, I'll just stay with the cheaper stuff. Like it's too much now. I'm going to go mass market, approachable, and do that as my business model. Or no, we built this business to be about great coffee. I'm going to stick with that. Well, if your product costs maybe 3 times what it did before, how good is your relationship with your audience, your community, to bring them with you? How confident do you feel that you can deliver value at that price point? And will you be able to bring enough people with you that you have a sustainable business? Now, I think for a lot of businesses, the answer will be yes, if they do it right. But that is probably something I'd be thinking about now. And I know it's not a really fun time to think about those things in a cost of living crisis where everything seems to suffer above inflation kind of price increases almost. Labor costs aren't going down anytime soon. It's an unfortunate thing to have to think about. But from everything from process to recipe design, I'd probably be bearing those things in mind a little bit more. Like the days of being a slightly wasteful 20-gram dose for a double espresso, probably gone. Probably should bring that back down. Like, I'm not saying Italy was right all along at 14 grams. I'm not making, or 7. I'm not making that argument. But I am thinking, your portion control. Just have you really dialed that in? Have you really thought about it? Are you doing that because you think it's the best beverage, or because that's just what someone told you to do and it's easy and I can just 18 is a nice number, or 20 is a nice number, or whatever it's going to be? Like it's, great specialty businesses will need to be relatively lean and thoughtful in terms of their cost of goods and how they think about those things, I think. And so it would be now just making sure that there's nothing wasteful in your system. I don't think enough businesses probably audit themselves that way, but and it'd be of great benefit if they did. But that's going to be a part of staying competitive if you want to keep serving coffee that you are generally excited about.
Thinking about what you're doing is something I believe we do. We think about it, but maybe we are rash in our decisions about it, or we just glom onto something. Trends. This is why trends are what they are. But having a kind of a thinking framework requires, it seems like you would have to have the end goal in mind even farther than just 1 week. What's the downstream impact of this? And when I think about your content, of course, I think it's thoughtful because you have to decipher what it is. Like earlier we said, what is the goal of this content? What's the temperature of the room? And it could just be, fun, maybe, dare I say, frivolous, or just, crazy, like making a fake coffee puck or a edible coffee puck
We've all
recipe.
thought about eating them.
Very fun. I've eaten one on a dare when I was a young barista. Not pleasant. I'm sure yours is better.
It's not good.
No,
I've tried both. I prefer the one that's actually edible. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I'm still here though. I survived. And I think there's this idea of now approaching a topic, approaching something that if you're in charge of a business or a channel, what is it that you do to think through what it is you're about to invest into? Whether it's content or equipment or a recipe or a menu, how do you go about, what's your framework for thinking about a topic to deliver both your opinion, because it is your channel, but also to reflect this stuff in such a way that it includes the people that are listening to it as well and helps them?
I mean, I can answer that from my perspective with the work that I do, but that is also a slightly strange answer in some ways because of the nature of what I do. So I don't know how helpful it'll be, but I'll tell you the truth. There are a sort of few tenets within what we do that are important. To some extent, we need to make work that we're proud of. That's normal. I think that's pretty healthy. Two, the sort of the why of what we do is about this goal of building people's appreciation and value of coffee. Right? That's the underlying subtext of everything we're chasing, which is we just want you to enjoy coffee more and therefore increase its worth to you. Knowing at some point, because that will literally mean that you have to spend more money on it. And we would like you to do that because I love great coffee and I would like to see it continue to be a thing that we can have. There's a slightly weird twist to what we do and how we see it that maybe is possibly one that people ought to be thinking about too. I don't know. But we are aware, those of us that work on this channel and do these things, that we have an incredible opportunity, that we have an incredible freedom and we have resource to some extent, not infinite resource, but some resource. And we have these other two goals. And so we think about what is it that we can do that no one else is able to do? Because that's from a sort of viewer perspective. Let's take if we go back to sort of YouTube, right? I can review a coffee grinder, and I'm not sure I can do it notably better than anyone else in some ways. Like anyone can buy the grinder, anyone can think deeply about it, consider it, film a review of it. Maybe we have a little bit more in the way of production quality, but people don't really care that much. It's nice that it looks nice, but they don't watch a video or not because of how it looks. And so for us, things like reviews come lower down the kind of priority list because that's not something that only we could do. And so that encourages us to take more risks, to take on more ambitious projects, because it's not really viable for anyone else to do them. It's not, it doesn't make financial sense. It doesn't, people just don't have whatever resource, be it time or expertise or money, whatever it's going to be, to make the thing. Those are the things that we think are the most important things that we should make. They're the riskiest things. They're probably the least sensible things from a balance sheet perspective. But we have in our heads an obligation to make things that other people can't, because we can. And so we should use that opportunity. I don't think that's a bad way to think about most businesses. What is it that you can do in your business that no one else can do? That's about building a moat around what you do as much as anything else, and also having genuine satisfaction in your work. If you really are driven to open a business because of your love of coffee, what is it you can bring to that business that no one else could bring to theirs? And if you don't have something, should you find that edge? Would that not be useful in building that business? To have a good answer to that question, what is it that my knowledge, my experience, my vision, my skills will allow that other people can't do? That's a nice way of, I suppose, considering opportunities or finding a North Star in the work that you do. So that's my answer. It's a bit of a strange one.
It's a great answer. No, it's great because I'm thinking about the fact, well, maybe it's not a fact, I say that reflexively, but it doesn't seem that that was what you were doing early on. That mindset was only what I can do, because you were doing the reviews and you built a broad base of knowledge. And now people can still go back and listen to and consume all of those things. And with an understanding of who is James Hoffmann, how has he talked about coffee? What is in beyond James, it's now greater than that. It's transcendent in terms of the fact that it's a industry-wide coverage of coffee. And now you get to have this charter. At what point did you decide that that was going to be sort of the vision or the mission statement that you would live by?
So reviews existed or were chosen as a sort of video type for a couple of different reasons. And part of that is how people use YouTube, which is it's a sort of knowledge resource. And if you're thinking about buying something, chances are you're going to look on YouTube for that thing. Is this thing good? I'm going to buy an AeroPress. Should I buy an AeroPress? I'll probably ask YouTube before I ask sort of Google, because it's just going to save me ads of people selling AeroPresses. But so I'm going to be like, where do I do my research? Oh, just how do I make it better? What's the deal? I'll go there. And so for me, I was looking to meet people who were curious about something coffee related. And then very early on, we worked out that reviews were a very good way to build trust. We worked out that we didn't want to pay for pay for the equipment. We never wanted to receive freebies or loaners or anything else. So we could give you an honest opinion. I bought this like you would with my money. No one helped me. This is full price. And it hurt like it would hurt you to buy the thing. Am I mad about that? Or am I delighted about that? Like it changes it. And so reviews allowed us to find a sort of new audience and then begin to build a relationship based on trust with them. So that, and hopefully entertain them along the way, right? Like it's about, kind of, they liked the review, they liked listening to it, they liked what they saw in terms of how we talked about things. and I have a chance maybe later, because you now trust me a little bit, that I can tell you something else about coffee and something else about coffee and something else about coffee. So it was a great way to find new people and someone searching for an AeroPress. Well, you know, the AeroPress is one of the best-selling products in coffee's history. I don't know how many they sold. No one will tell me, but tens of millions, I suspect, at this point, right? And that they didn't all go to specialty people. They went to anybody. If you've met people, you've met dozens of people who don't really care about coffee, but kind of love their AeroPress. They're not invested in the coffee that goes into the AeroPress, but they kind of love the AeroPress, right? And so I was like, great, if I can find you, I'd love to drag you down into like how good coffee can be. That would be fun. So reviews served that function. We went through a couple of sort of changes in attitude. I think one was I disliked how disproportionately loud I was as a voice in the room. And so in most sort of review spaces, let's take phones. That's easy, right? Like you can go and watch 10 loud voices on YouTube give you an opinion of a phone. And if one of them doesn't like it, but the other 9 do, it's kind of fine. You know what I mean? You can be like, oh, okay, I agree with this person, I don't, but they're not going to hurt the phone company. I ended up in a position where I could be honest and truthful and then wildly damaging to someone's business. And that's not really what motivates me in the morning. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't take pleasure in like, oh yeah, we brought down this new startup coffee manufacturer who's on their first product that they didn't get right. That's not what I'd want to do. If they make something great, I'd love to help people find it. But, you know, then it meant, are we just making positive reviews? Is that useful? Do we want to feed consumerism in our culture? You know, coffee has a problem in that you get a little bit into it. A lot of the messages you'll receive will be, now just upgrade this, spend a bit more money on this, and then you'll be happy. But then you did that, and well, now you need to spend a bit more money on this to be happy. And that's just, you know, consumer culture these days, which I'm not super into. And I don't really want to make just ads for other people's products masquerading as reviews either. So we sort of pulled back on reviews. And then in addition, we went much deeper on the stuff that we don't really show, which is all the benchmarking and objective testing that goes into stuff. Because if I do say it's bad, I'd like to be very confident that it is bad and I should tell you it's bad. And the company I'm telling you it's bad, you know, it's appropriate. And that's less fun. So the days of just like, here's a fun coffee thing that I found and here's some flaws with it, whatever, but like here it is. The channel kind of got too loud for that to sort of be a responsible decision. And that's okay. Like there's too many coffee grinders now. My brain can't keep up. There's just too many. I don't know how people do manage to stay on top of this slew of new grinders released this week with X number of different burr sets and all the rest of it, which is like, I'm cool, great. But I can't manage that mentally alongside the other things I have going on. So I'm okay not to be like a pure product review place. And then it allows us to experiment a bit more and make things that are fun and weird or just we thought might be good. And maybe they don't find a big audience, maybe they do. But yeah, it kind of goes back to, again, we want to be proud of the things that we make. And I think for us, it would, you know, just like if I was just knocking out reviews of espresso machines under $1,000, after a while, I would feel bored and I would quit. And so I don't want to quit. So yeah.
There's a level of consciousness, self-consciousness or awareness, let's say, that's a better way to put it, where you say you don't want to be the loudest voice in the room. And the room in this case, I suppose, is the internet or the room of a person's mind who has a limited amount of time to invest into. It's not infinite numbers of videos we're going to watch about coffee. It's only a select few. And we don't get to go to all the coffee shops in our city. We only go to a few. And I'm in my mind, I'm thinking parallels of what you're describing as the evolution of the cafes building trust with their customers and meeting them where they are. In your case, it's a person wanting to learn about burr sets and grinders. For somebody at a coffee shop, it may be the same thing, but it's really, can I get a good drip cup of coffee here? Can I get a great latte here? And it's not as fun as we as coffee professionals really want it to be. But it's the bread and butter, the building of trust that then, you know, maybe you have a specialty drink or a new processed method coffee that you're selling people. But that happens on top of that building self-awareness is part of that. It seems like you're thinking about, well, what's the wake that I'm leaving behind me? And if we're paying attention, we're probably doing the same thing in our cafes, thinking we kind of biffed that one. Well, with that interaction with a customer, we maybe it burned a bridge with them. We went too fully into this one direction, or we alienated, or whatever it was. But then we learned from that, and it feels like how your channel and your perception of your role in the industry has evolved is an inspiring story, because it does show that even with a huge amount of influence, there needs to be, alongside of that, this sense of responsibility for really caring for people and doing this for them, not just to them. That's the whole hospitality thing, right? Danny Meyer's book. We're not doing hospitality to people, we're doing it for them, right?
I think it all kind of, funnily enough, ties back to community, which is a sort of, without delving too deep into it, it's sort of, it feels like the great loss of the modern era is that of community. And I've always benefited from being an active member in various communities, in coffee or outside of them. And I feel like that's what a coffee shop is. It's community. It's what an audience is. It's community. And I feel like as much as it sounds kind of selfless to say, I want to do things for the community, at the same time, if I'm honest, that's always come back, more than come back in a funny sort of way in my time investing in whichever communities I've been a part of. It's been a net benefit, which sounds selfish, but not, I don't know. But I just feel like there's no downside to that. I'm aware I could work a much more extractive angle doing what I do. I could probably make more money transacting an audience much more aggressively. Definitely phrases that you hear in the sort of creator side of the community. But like, I would rather just try to be helpful. I think that's a key piece of this, which is this broadly helpful? And I feel like whether it's been books or other things like that, there's enough politics in what we do. The question I always had was, can I make something that anyone could be like, this is useful, you should use this. This is a helpful thing. And because it's helpful to them, even if it's, not directly, I mean, sure, I make a fraction of a dollar, but like, for other roasteries to promote a book that helps consumers enjoy coffee more, or whatever it's going to be like that. If I just made it my face, me, that seemed less useful as a tool to everyone else. It would be useful to me, but not everyone else, if that, I don't know. So yeah, I would aim to be, I suppose, helpful, and thinking about trying to be helpful to more than just myself or the team that work on this stuff. I think I've always I was a nerd in coffee, and I was very lonely in 2004. There was nobody in London I could talk to, and I came up in an internet coffee community with people like you, and that bound me together. It taught me, it educated me, it corrected me, it motivated me, and that was, I was treated well because I worked hard to try and be of value to that community. And I think we saw people who would do that, and we saw people who just tried to take from the community, and they never really seemed to benefit long term. So it was always like feed it. The rising tide thing is very much about community to me. I don't know. I've rambled at this point now, so I'm sorry.
Well, I like the co-creative aspect of when we talk about the future of coffee. It really is what we create together. And whether you are labeling yourself as a creator or a participant or a professional, obviously, I like the idea of community being central to it and being of use to. Not, I mean, being a member of the community is great, but thinking, what can I do to benefit others and how can I be helpful is such a great thing to constantly have before your mind every morning as you work. So a lighter and last question, I guess, maybe for you here is related to somebody who obviously knows a lot about coffee and puts opinions out there and researches. I'm really interested to know what you've changed your mind on recently because of the kind of research and kind of exploration you've done that previously you had the opposite opinion or even an opposite published opinion.
That's a good question. That you want a good 180 though, don't you? You want a good full change of heart. I think I'm not the only one who came from a there's the easy answer to this, which is inevitably like roast level in a fun sort of way, where I came from light roast is purity as a background. Do you know what I mean? And anything other than light roasting was destructive and therefore antithetical to the purity of the coffee bean and the transparency of its flavors. I don't necessarily think that way anymore. I think I perhaps value different aspects, and I'm much more open-minded about what people enjoy about coffee now. Like, I think I've just let it go that while I still have a very strong, I suppose, fence around the things that I really like, I am just much less dictatorial about that's how it must always be to be good. And I think, early days specialty, that was definitely a part of that. Yeah, I think most of the times I've changed, it's been just a softening, and maybe that's just age. I think about that quite a lot. It's a I'm becoming the old guard. Oh God, it's happening. I'm an old head. And I always remember being kind of like surprised that the older generation in coffee, when I got into it, weren't kind of angrier and fierier, and we're a bit more like, just, it's all right. You can enjoy that. You don't have, and we were like, no, must be this. This is right. And I think you very much know what I'm talking about. But yeah, outside of that,
well, I'm curious what that fence,
I don't know.
what's inside that fence. Your best like your personal go-tos.
Yeah, I mean, like I am an enjoyer of the kind of washed coffees from reasonably high elevations, from pretty much, well, I'm kind of open to where, but like that kind of sweet but sparkly flavor profile of like pretty light roasted, washed, developed to the point where it's sweet. I don't like it where it's just like acid and grass. I don't want that. But those kind of coffees appeal to me. I have never really enjoyed the kind of wilder end of things. And that's been my whole kind of coffee career. I never had the first coffee that blew my mind was like a washed Kenyan coffee. And that blew my mind, but I didn't have the blueberry kind of like wild strawberry like moment that a lot of people have with like, this is amazing. Mine was like black fruit and acids. And I was like, what? So that was always a line for me. But yeah, like I still like relatively light roasts, not aggressively like razor acid roasts, but like, yeah, I like clarity, and I like a kind of sparkly top end, and I like freshness and acidity in my coffee, but I really just want it to be fundamentally sweet as well.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing. And that means some fruit for me too. But yeah, it's both a lot of coffee and also a small piece of what coffee is. So I'm not badly served.
No, you have a lot of options within that spectrum for sure, which is great part about being in the industry now. And I feel like I'm in a relatively similar area of coffee at the washed, the balanced. I appreciate developed coffees more than I would admit I did when I was younger, I think. And maybe that's just because I'm very guarded about what I like, and it's my coffee time, and I will, drink what I enjoy, not what I feel I need to. I don't want to accurately enjoy coffee. I just want to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Let's see. So, James, this has been great to have you on the show. It always goes by so fast, but thank you for taking time to talk with us. Yeah. You've got a new edition of your book getting ready to launch into the world again. So tell us a little bit about when we can expect that to come out, and then just the usual. Where would you like us to go to just interact with more of your content?
Sure. So the third edition, good Lord, third edition, is out in the US November 9th, in UK, Europe, October 9th, I think, is November 4th, US. My brain is soup. That's like, it's a big upgrade over the previous editions. It's like 40% new material in there, and it's quite heavily expanded as well, which has been good, a big project. And then, yeah, you probably can most easily find me at YouTube. That's probably the best place to find me. It's youtube.com/@JamesHoffmann, 2 N's, 2 F's, that way around. And then, yeah, I'm sure I'm other places on the internet too, but I don't have a good centralized place where everyone should just go. But yeah, you can, I gather, get away with just typing like British coffee guy into YouTube, and I'll pop up in a sort of hilarious way. But yeah, that's the place where things go first, and then they tend to sort of appear later in other sort of places. But yeah, that's me. That's what I'm doing.
Excellent. Appreciate you, James. Thank you so much.
And you. Thanks, Chris. Okay.
Well, everybody, I hope that you enjoyed that conversation with James Hoffmann. As promised, it has a lot of nuance around the idea of education and expressing coffee knowledge to our customers in a way that helps them deepen their enjoyment of coffee. And I think James is just a master at this process of creating unique value in coffee content. It's not an easy thing to keep something like this going. And it really says a lot, first, of course, about, somebody's ability to keep something like this fresh and interesting and engage such a large audience. But the fact that coffee has all of these different corners and places to go to talk about means we never run out of things to talk about either. And that should give you some encouragement that when you start this journey and you're inspired by somebody like James Hoffmann or others out there that are doing this educational content and entertaining content around coffee to just really celebrate this beverage and help people love it even more, you're not going to run out of ideas. And you can create this right in your coffee shop with the coffees that are on the shelf right now, through the coffees you serve and brew every single day. Start with getting those baristas that you have, resourced and excited and educated, trained up, and then when they're working with hospitality in mind and they're working for the customer, and they also bring in these enriching moments of coffee knowledge that actually help the customer fit them out with the kind of knowledge that is functionally helping them enjoy coffee. It is magic. That's the place you want to go, because you don't feel lectured, you feel resourced, you feel equipped, you feel like you belong, and it's a big old coffee family. It's really great. The people who enjoy it, the people who brew it. And just look at 2.3 million subscribers of James Hoffmann's channel. If you look at the demographic breakdown of that, you know that it's just a whole big melting pot of different backgrounds, different professional focuses, all with one thing in common: a cup of coffee. And so my thanks to James Hoffmann for being a guest on the show again. Of course, the easy thing is just go to YouTube and look for James Hoffmann, 2 F's, 2 N's, James Hoffmann. He has a website as well, which is jameshoffman.co.uk. But again, if you just look up James Hoffmann on YouTube, that is the springboard for all of this content. And you need to subscribe there and get the book that is coming out, the new version with all of the updated information, a lot of new content. And the website for that book is theworldatlasofcoffee.com. I need to get my copy actually to update from my first one, but go ahead and do that for sure. And again, huge thank you, James, for being on the show, and for you all coming here and spending your time listening to these episodes and supporting this show. I really appreciate it. So if you have any questions, comments, or feedback for me about today's episode or anything else, just email chris@keystotheshop.com. That's also, of course, where you can reach me if you're interested in coaching and consulting for your coffee shop. I work one-on-one with coffee operators like yourself, and let's see what we can do. So again, chris@keystotheshop.com. Now, that's it for the show, everybody. Thank you. Go make some great coffee. Go help other people make great coffee. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.